Hi, this is Stu Turgel, your host of The Phoenix File, a weekly news magazine and community conversation with the people and programs making a positive impact on the quality of life in our community. It began with one family collecting donations of household goods and clothing for one Afghan refugee family. But it's grown into a network of volunteers who work with local social service agencies to help more than 2,000 refugee families to start their new lives in America with donations of furniture, household goods, clothing, and a warm welcome. Families forced to flee for their lives from war or other armed conflict because of fears of persecution have been assisted in their resettlement thanks to the generous spirit of the Welcome to America project. On tonight's edition of The Phoenix File, I'll be talking with Katie Thorson and Carolyn Campbell of the Welcome to America project. That's coming up next right here on Radio Phoenix, where the Valley comes to talk, sing, connect. Good evening, I'm Stu Turgel, your host of The Phoenix File, a weekly news magazine that features the people and programs making a positive difference on the quality of life in the Valley of the Sun. In 1883, the American poet Emma Lazarus wrote a sonnet that she named The New Colossus, and she wrote it to raise money for the construction of the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty. And in 1903, the poem was engraved on a bronze plaque and mounted inside the pedestal's lower level. A portion of that sonnet contains some of the most recognizable words in American history. Lazarus wrote, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." Well, those words have become a message to the world about what America stands for and what is a reflection of its founding principles and values. And that is that this country has a long and proud tradition of opening its arms and welcoming immigrants and refugees. But in the past few years, this metaphorical welcome mat has been challenged and under siege by those who have a deep-seated fear of the other. People who would like to close the doors to America to many who look to this country not just for a better life, but for freedom from oppression and danger. Well, my guests tonight do not represent a political organization, but rather a humanitarian organization which works hard to uphold the spirit of Emma Lazarus's words. Joining me in the studio tonight are Carolyn Campbell, the founder, and Katie Thorson, the executive director of the Welcome to America project. Carolyn and Katie, thanks for being here and welcome to the Phoenix File.
Thank you for having us.
It's wonderful to be here.
Well, your work is exclusively involved with helping resettle refugees. So, Carolyn, why don't we start with you by asking you to tell us what the Welcome to America project is and how it began. How did it get started?
Well, the Welcome to America project is the actual name of what we say to the refugees when they are when we're meeting with them, leaving off the project, of course. But the Welcome to America project was actually started from a newspaper article. There was a newspaper that doesn't exist anymore called the Scottsdale Tribune. And there was a tragedy in my personal family. My brother-in-law was killed in the towers, the Twin Towers, Tower 1 on September 11th. And on October 7th, when we were waiting for word still, I saw that article with the Afghan family on the front of the newspaper, and that was the first time I realized that there were refugees coming to the United States on a regular basis. I decided to help that family basically because I'm a mom and I have 5 kids, and that family was a mom with a 5th child on the way, and I knew that their struggles were just beginning in this country, and so we wanted to go over there and say, hey, you're welcome here.
And welcome they are. at least by your organization and many others too. So while we hear a lot of the negative side of immigration and refugee resettlement, there's a lot of good things going on, and we're going to talk about that tonight. So I'm really glad you're here. You don't work with all immigrants. You work exclusively on refugee issues, refugees who have already settled in this country, who have entered this country. So tell us how you define someone who is a refugee.
Well, refugees are actually people that have been screened through the United States State Department. And there is a program that our country has, our federal government has, to help those who are essentially stateless. And there are millions of people around the world at any given moment who fled their country because of persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution from their government or a rogue group within their government, and they're not protected from those people. So when they flee over the border of that country, they become stateless, and the United Nations High Commissioner on Refugees identifies those groups, and our country is a participant in resettling some of those people. In fact, the United States really only settles about 0.5% of the world's refugees on an annual basis. So it really is a small number of people who actually reach that point of being resettled. The United Nations would like to have people go back home. Sometimes that happens, but when they can't, it's both a humanitarian and also a good public policy for countries around the world to help those people find a new state, a new homeland.
The refugees that come into this country, I think, are often confused by a lot of people. The terms immigrant and refugee are often used interchangeably, and that's certainly not the case. So I appreciate your defining that. I mean, the notion of being stateless is a concept that I don't think very many people can even relate to. Katie, where are the refugees that you're assisting? Where are they coming from? Are they coming from many nations in the world today, where people are fleeing with refugee status, or is it a small number of places where people are most threatened?
It's coming from all over the world. I think it would depend on what you mean by many nations, but they're coming from mainly in 2017, most of them came here from the Democratic Republic of Congo, from Cuba, from Iraq, and from Syria.
And we talked a little bit about how they qualify for refugee status. So you are made aware of them how?
We work with refugee resettlement agencies as well as a couple school districts, and they provide us referrals for families who they identified as having a need for the Welcome to America Project services. They come in and we work together to provide them not only the clothing and the necessities, the home necessities that they need to make their apartments a home, but also that community welcome, which sets us apart from some of the other agencies. You
partner or work with other organizations as well?
We do.
What
many
kinds of
them.
Organizations?
The International Rescue Committee, Lutheran Social Services, Catholic Charities, and like I mentioned, a couple of school districts, Alhambra Elementary School District and Washington Elementary School District, as far as the referrals to us. And then we partner with many more to make sure none of our donations go to waste, and we're holding each other up to support everyone.
That's great. I want to remind our listeners that one way that you can support Radio Phoenix is by becoming one of our sustaining members. For as little as $35 per year, members receive discounts, savings, and other benefits provided by our membership program partners. And don't forget, the membership fee is tax deductible. For more information or to sign up, call 480-829-5746, or you can go online to radiophoenix.org. Click on the support tab at the top and then become a member on the drop-down menu. And we thank you for your generous support of community radio. Well, as I said at the top of the show, things are changing a lot for all immigrants and refugees. Given the position of this current administration in Washington, are you seeing a difference in the number of refugees being admitted to the U.S.?
Absolutely.
What's happening? Give us a picture of, if you were to show us a bar graph or a trend line, what's the story?
I know People
going down.
can't see me,
Listeners
but
can't
it's-
see, but it's nosediving.
It's being drastically cut.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I don't know, realize, but there is actually a letter that the President of the United States sends out every year that sets the number of refugees that will come into the United States. And then that is funded, of course, by Congress. So it's really a recommendation. And so I think that's some of the concern is that, every time there is a new administration, will that president continue to set that number high or lower? And so some of it has to do with the conflicts around the world and how many there are and where people are, because the State Department knows generally where the pockets of large refugee populations are, but it is the president's letter that everybody looks to, and that'll come out towards the end of the year. So that's, I think, when the State Department and the Office of Refugee Resettlement in Washington, and then, of course, they fund the resettlement agencies, and then, of course, down to us, we're just the local welcome wagon people. We're just kind of all waiting to see. There's a lot of people waiting overseas and all around the world to find out, too, if they can find a new homeland.
Well, you said that the letter comes out at the end of the year. So
Yes.
at the end of 2017,
Yeah, exactly. It'll come out at the end of 20. Yes.
Right. So a letter came out at the end of 2017. Any idea kind of what the number was?
It's currently 45,000, which will be admitted, and that's far lower than the lowest it's ever been.
So we're talking sort of record low.
Record
numbers.
low. That's
Yeah.
right.
Where on average, what kind of numbers were we looking at?
The lowest it had been before was in 1986 with Reagan, and that was 67,000.
And big on the upper end?
On the upper end, I wouldn't have that number.
Well,
do you?
I'm sure it was over 100,000
Over
back in the
100,000.
days. Like Gerald Ford, for instance, was an extremely strong advocate for refugees after the Vietnam War. So,
Sure.
The numbers went way, way up of those people coming from Southeast Asia. So, but 45,000 is a very low number.
Well, I mentioned earlier, and I want to make sure everybody understands that I don't want to give people the wrong idea. You're not an organization that is beating on the doors of Congress people, and that's not what
that's
you
right.
do.
No.
You and we're going to get into what you do in a little bit. But do you have relationships with groups that are what we would call advocacy organizations who might be the ones that are encouraging greater opportunities for refugee families?
Right now would be the International Rescue Committee. There aren't any strong ties with any specific advocacy groups, but that's been an item of exploration as we move forward, in particular with the numbers and where it's at and what more we can do.
So is the IRC an organization that you would sort of refer people to if they called you in error thinking that you were that organization?
Yes.
The IRC is sort of one of the flagship groups, and
They have many, many resources for
Yeah.
families in this situation.
that's great. Since your founding, you've accomplished a great deal on behalf of refugee families who've settled in our community. The numbers are really impressive. So I'd ask you if you could share some of the data with us to better illustrate what you've been able to do.
We were talking about that earlier. We have right now an approximate of over 2,000 families have been served since 2001. We're guessing that that number may be a little bit higher at this point, and we've distributed over $2.5 million of in-kind donations, meaning the furniture and household goods that community members bring in to us that they want to see put into a home.
And you work with a lot of volunteers.
Yes, we welcome 1,300 volunteers annually to help us with our operations, our deliveries, our services, our behind the scenes. We're highly volunteer run with a small staff.
That's.
Yep, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say I wish people could see me smiling through the microphone because
She's smiling, folks. She's smiling.
As a founder, I went to the bank and put $35 in the bank, and the volunteers were me and my friends and my homemade flyer church across the street, and it's just really, really, really exciting.
Well,
to
on
know
this show,
that many volunteers
we
are going
welcome
out now.
lots of organizations that we call grassroots organizations,
Right.
and you are
Truly.
one of those grassroots organizations. But those grassroots have blossomed, or I guess
seeds
grass
of
doesn't blossom,
compassion,
but
absolutely.
Yeah, really. So.
And we were talking earlier, Katie and I, about, we think, a lot of the reason is it's just a simple but very common message
It
that
is.
we bring.
It is, and it's one that I think more people can relate to than not. So we're going to talk a little bit more after we take a short break, and then more of my conversation with Katie Thorson and Carolyn Campbell. You're listening to The Phoenix File. I'm Stu Turgel, and this is Radio Phoenix. Welcome back to the Phoenix File. This is Stu Turgel, your host, along with my guests Katie Thorson and Carolyn Campbell, and now more of our conversation about the Welcome to America Project. Well, let's talk about the Welcome to America Project in more specific terms. Once you've connected with a refugee family, how does that relationship develop? What are some of the first things you do once you get connected?
The first thing we do, and keep in mind, vast majority of this is conducted by volunteers who are dedicating their time to supporting these families, is we go in with what's called a home visit. So 2 volunteers along with the caseworker and the family go into the apartment of the family and assess their needs. So many of them are empty or near empty. They don't have the necessities they need, no forks, knives, bowls. That assessment is made. That is sent to the warehouse in Tempe, where more volunteers pack for the families for the following weekend. So there's packing and shopping involved with collecting their needs. Then more volunteers every Saturday serve between 3 and 6 families with delivering those items, going into the apartments and transforming them into safe and comfortable homes, along with providing that community welcome and getting to converse with these families and hear their stories.
Language sometimes is a challenge?
Language sometimes is a challenge. We work around that with translators. The home visit I was on recently, the 9-year-old from down the way came and translated for us, which was lovely. A lot of times we'll have either phone translations or an individual in there who can help with us.
The children shall lead us.
The children shall lead us, yes.
So what are the greatest needs of the refugee families?
I would say, anything that you would use moving into an apartment, they need those same things, So there is a basic kit, if you will, that's my word, that the resettlement agency gives them when they first arrive. But it's very, very basic. For instance, 1 couch for the apartment. So you would, anything else but the couch they need. They need everything for the kitchen. They need everything for the bathrooms, towels, sheets. The children, of course, would love toys. And the moms usually like some kind of decorative item. So even things like, vases and pictures and things that flesh out a bathroom, like shower curtains, pretty much anything that you would like, they would like.
They didn't leave their homelands with a Mayflower moving van. They
Whatever
came,
they can fit on their backs or in a bag.
Very, very little is what they brought with them. So they basically are starting over, and we.
And the plane fare also is not free. They're loaned the money for the plane tickets, and so when they get to the United States after they've been here a few months, of course it's a work program, so they're immediately working with the agency to find employment. And about 6 months after they have been here, they get a loan statement, and they have to pay all their airfare back. So I just wanted to point that out, that they really are working to...
It's not a free ride.
It's not a free ride.
They come here in debt.
They come here in debt.
Yeah.
when you connect with them, is it an ongoing relationship with these families, or is it a kind of basically a single encounter where you offer your help and then move on to another?
That's probably the hardest part. Is we are not the resettlement agency. We are not the caseworkers. We are helping the resettlement agencies with the family's needs. So we come in and we meet with the family, and then we if you do want further communication with them, that's not in our control. We suggest that the resettlement agency be reached out to.
So it's kind of a one and done.
That's why we allow that time to get to
yeah.
know the family before we leave.
Well, where does all of the household goods and other things that you provide, where does that come from?
Community members just like you and me.
Okay, and tell us more.
Well, we have a warehouse in Tempe, and drop-off days are listed on the website. We have certain days where donations
Tell us what your website is.
Our website is www.wtap.org.
Welcome to AmericaProject.org. Right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so there's donation drop-off times on there. We do some pickups within a certain distance for larger items, and then as well as individuals do drives, there's kit making, there's all sorts of items, but all of it comes from residents in the valley.
Who does all this work? You have a staff of thousands, I'm sure.
That would be cool.
Wouldn't that be cool? So you have a staff and you have volunteers, and I know from our conversation before we went on the air that the staff is very small.
Yeah.
But you do have some staff and lots of volunteers who work on this important project.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a few staff members who are incredibly passionate and dedicated, and a ton of volunteer help.
Well, for people who would like to get involved, what are the volunteer opportunities, and what kind of time commitment are they expected to make?
Wherever you have an interest, a desire, I think there's probably a place for you at Welcome to America Project. If you want to be in the warehouse and more detail-oriented sorting, packing for the families, you can come and do that. You can also go on the welcome, so delivering items to families, and we have as well as some other more behind-the-scenes opportunities as well. But those items, those opportunities can range from anywhere from a couple hours to a couple hours for a year if you wanted. And so if you want more information, the website provides that.
The website is the place to go. And we talked before about the household goods and the other
Right.
personal care items and whatnot that are provided by the Welcome to America Project. I'm holding in my hand a list of the items that you accept and the ones that you don't accept, and it's a long list, so I'm not going to ask you to go through the whole thing. But generally, what kinds of things are you looking for, and generally, what things are you saying, no, we really can't make use of those items? Do they fall into categories, I think?
I'll start with the no items. So if you're thinking about these families and where they're placed in very, very small apartments, regardless of if it's 2 people or 9. So we can't accept the larger sofas, any sleeper beds, giant dining tables. Those just don't fit. So smaller sofas, love seats, smaller coffee tables, and then any other necessities like Carolyn mentioned before, the things that you might overlook, like an oven mitt, a pan, Tupperware, silverware, anything just to make a house a home and for it to be comfortable so you can live and eat and focus on other items like getting a job.
All right, so
providing.
I want my listeners to know that they need to go to the website, www.wtap.org, and there's a list there of things that these folks need to help these refugee families make their transition to life in our community easier. Go there, take a look, and be as generous as you can. Listen, in the time we have left, I'd love for you to share some of the family bios that you list under this week's families on your website. These vignettes really help to put a face on the work that you do, and they describe precisely what you do and why it's so important for the refugee families to connect with the Welcome to America Project. Can you share a little bit of a story or two?
Yeah, if
Good.
you don't mind,
No,
I'll
please.
share one from a few weeks back.
Yeah.
These bios are taken from our home visit volunteers, and they gather as much information as they can can upon meeting this family about where they've been and how they came to be in the United States, even though they didn't choose the United States. But we gather all of this information. And one I wanted to point out was a very, very special one for Welcome to America Project. This was a young man who was an unaccompanied minor. He came here as a minor, no other family members, separated, and has been bopping around from foster family to foster family. And he just got his first ever apartment. And we were the ones that came in and welcomed him and furnished his apartment with a corpse of 20 women who were there to greet him and help him set up his home, which
a little
was
overwhelming.
Oh, it was so much motherly love. And so that one was an especially special one for the Welcome to America Project, to allow him to be comfortable in his first apartment.
Anyone else you want to share?
There are many. Yeah. One we recently did as well. There was a man who had been a doctor in his country before. So we arrived and he was in his coat, his white doctor's coat, and overly appreciative and hugging and so welcoming. And at the end, it depends on families' personalities, but he sat everyone down and played guitar for everyone and sang, and there was tea served. And I wasn't at that one, but I saw the video, and my eyes were definitely misty. It was really cool to see them all.
I'd like to
singing.
close by sharing something from your website that I think my listeners will really appreciate. You ask the following question: what do Albert Einstein, Madeleine Albright, Casanova, Sigmund Freud, and Victor Hugo all have in common? They were all refugees. The U.S. and people from around the world have benefited from the talents and perseverance, courage, and the heart of a group vastly different from each other, but who share a common will to survive. Those are wonderful words. I wish you continued success in your work to welcome refugee families to our community. Katie and Carolyn, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Well, that is our show for this week. Thanks again to my guests tonight, Carolyn Campbell and Katie Thorson of the Welcome to America Project. Please join me next Tuesday night at 6:30 for another conversation about the very best in our community who are improving the quality of life in the Valley of the Sun. Until next week, thanks for listening to The Phoenix File. For Radio Phoenix, this is Stu Turgel.